this is something that is not it's not new, like Lithuanian border guards and Polish border guards both track daily pushbacks. If you go to their website, you will see how many pushbacks they have done since 2021.
Yeah, they're like celebrating it in some ways to say how effective they're being.
Yeah, exactly. He enters his hotel in Vilnius, and the manager of the hotel called plainclothed officers who grabbed him and whisked him back to the Belarusian border. I meet so many people that they cannot tell their story, that are not ready or not prepared, or those traumatic experiences don't allow them to share their story with the world. But Sanooja had this desire to tell the world what had happened to her husband. When he made it to Lithuania on the third day of being in Vilnius, he got pushed back another time. And he found himself back in the forest without water, without backpack, without food. And he sends a last message to his wife, Sanooja, saying basically, no water, I think I'll die. I love you. I so admire Sanooja, being being willing to fight this from 8,000 kilometers away, where she is in this small peninsula in Sri Lanka. That sometimes if she needs to go to an embassy, it's not even in her city. She needs to travel to Colombo, which is 10 hours away by bus, and also more than 10,000 rupees. It's also very costly for her to do all this. But she's pushing, and she continues to believe that Sanrim deserves to be remembered, they deserve justice. Yeah, they used to call each other Thangam. That means gold in Tamil. And Sanooja said that they started calling each other like that since very young. Even when she wouldn't accept that she liked him in school, in her diary, she would write about him and would call him Tangam. Sometimes she calls volunteers from the NGO who can go to the grave for an hour or something and play the phone so that she can pray in front of the grave. That's something that she has been doing for the last 3 years.
Welcome back to Fractured. This is our final episode of season 4 before we take a quick summer break. And to create a bit of a bookend for our 4th season, we have the luxury of having Gabriela Ramirez with us, an investigative journalist who has worked part of the Border Graves Project, which was an in-depth series that discussed European borders, missing migrants, and a whole host of international human rights violations. Her piece in particular, Widowed by Europe's Borders, has won numerous prizes across in the international journalism world. And we're very, very lucky to have her with us today to unpack that article and then also kind of dive into a little bit more of what this really looks like in a larger picture, not just for the individual case that her article was about. So, Gabriela, thank you so much for being with us today. And we're really excited to have you with us on the show.
Thank you, Doug. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, so I alluded to it in the beginning in the intro that your article has really won a ton of awards in recent weeks. And every time we connect, it seems like you're on your way to another award ceremony. And it's really, really wonderful to see how much creative and also journalistic love this piece is getting. It's a really, really important story. And we're very happy to have you here with us today to talk about it. I've read this article repeatedly now in advance of this connection with you and also just in our correspondence. But for our audience who may have not read this article at all, could you give us a little bit of a breakdown of what this story is really about?
Yeah, sure. With the Bayura's Borders is the story of Sanooja and Sanrim. They are lovely couple who come from Sri Lanka, and Sanrim made the decision to leave Sri Lanka to go to Europe and find a way to get a better life for his family back home. And he, after several tries, he made it to Lithuania through the Belarusian border. And like the situation in the Belarus border, like he had to go through multiple pushbacks, but he made it to Lithuania. And when he made it to Lithuania on the third day of being in Vilnius, he got pushed back another time. And he found himself back in the forest without water, without backpack, without food. And he sends a last message to his wife, Sanooja, saying basically, no water, I think I'll die, I love you. And that was really his farewell without knowing to his wife. And since then, Sanooja started searching for him and trying to reach anyone in Lithuania and later everywhere in Europe and all across the world, basically trying to find someone who will tell her about the whereabouts of her husband. And the story is basically this struggle and the barriers the families have to find their loved ones that gone missing in Europe. And this article was part of, as you mentioned, of the Border Graves investigation, where we tried to investigate, or we investigated what happens to the people who died in Europe's borders, and identified more than 1,000 graves of people who have been buried without names. And this was a cross-border collaborative investigation that I had the honor to be part of and collaborate with other 7 journalists across Europe. One of those countries was Spain, Greece, Spain, Italy, France, Croatia, and Malta. And I covered the European eastern borders, Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland.
We've actually had several of your colleagues from the Border Graves program project on our program in recent episodes. I believe Stavros Malchoudis was on the most recent one. We did an episode called Buried in the Balkans, and it was about the Greek and the Balkan region with regard to this reporting. So we personally also have made our first feature film, which we've had several episodes about, called Even After Death, is about the deaths at sea. So we personally are very deeply engaged in this issue and have seen it from this perspective down here in the south of Europe. But what brought you to this project into the northeast of Europe? How did you end up getting engaged in this issue in the first place?
Yeah, that's like a very interesting question that I get asked several times, because
sure.
I'm Venezuelan, and like I don't speak Lithuanian. I live in Germany, but like don't live in Lithuania, right? Like how as a Venezuelan I ended up covering the Eastern European borders. And long story short, it was that basically in 2021, I had just finished my master's degree in Germany, and I moved to Berlin to start working with Unbias News, the cross-border newsroom that I work with as a multimedia editor. But the housing situation in Berlin is terrible, as you might know. Finding a long-term apartment can be quite complicated. So I had, before that, I had studied as an Erasmus student to an exchange semester in Lithuania, and I absolutely loved Vilnius. And I found myself like without an apartment in Berlin, and I had friends in Vilnius saying like, it's so easy to find a place here. Like, why don't you just come and find a short-term rental and go back to Berlin when you have a place? And I thought that was a great idea. So I decided to go to Vilnius, and I was there when this all started in 2021 when the Belarusian authoritarian government started opening the borders to create this path for people to come through Belarus to Europe, right? And I remember being in Vilnius, and I came across this article. It was a quote from a politician in Lithuania, and the newspaper had reported it like the exact quote, right? It said, "These are not migrants. These are not refugees. These are criminals." And that representation of migrants and what I was seeing as someone who was living in Lithuania as a migrant myself really stayed with me, and it made me wonder, are they really criminals? What's going on here? And that's when I started digging into what was going on in the Belarusian border in 2021. And I, like as a journalist there, I was not there to report, but it's when you come across a story, and because of your own experience as a migrant, and that moment my dad was also living as an undocumented migrant in South America, it really resonated with me personally, and I wanted to show that many of these migrants are not criminals, and you can not just replicate or simply tell the story the politicians want you to tell. As a journalist, you should go deeper, and that's what I wanted to do. And I ended up writing a story about the detention centers that in that moment were open in Lithuania, where many migrants and many people that were looking for asylum were detained for over a year without being able, like basically in prison, like they were not allowed to go outside. They had nothing to do in these places. And what I found it was that they were painters. Many of them were painters, many of them were nurses, doctors, like very prepared professional people. They were actually trying their best to get the best out of that situation they were in. So they started painting and doing beautiful art that an NGO started bringing these pieces of art to Vilnius and selling them as a way to get them some money in this situation, right? And that was my starting point as an investigative journalist covering Eastern Europe. And I left Lithuania, but after that article, somehow I kept connected to these sources, with this NGO in particular, and then later on, when I had these opportunities to be part of the cross-border investigation, I remember that we had only resources to do Poland, but like Poland has been one of the countries that have been mostly reported in this crisis, but somehow Lithuania is always left out. And I was like, okay, if I'm gonna do this, I need to cover Lithuania as well. And that's why I decided to go to Vilnius. And in Vilnius, I came across Sanrim's story. And in that moment, no one had any idea of who Sanrim was. Like, he was already buried, and his grave didn't have a name on it. The government knew who he was, but somehow they hadn't announced this publicly. So it was a secret, how you call it? Silent secret that everyone knew, or the government knew, the NGOs knew, but there was no report about it. So it's like he didn't exist in a way, right? And the NGOs had reported a man was found in the river on August 2022, but because apparently no, because the story of Sanooja was not public, then these men didn't make it to the news, and no one cared to dig more into it. I got Sanooja's contact, and when I met Sanooja, I I just remember how she was so outspoken and had this urge to tell her story. She, as a journalist who have been covering and interviewing so many people that are a victim of violence in borders, I meet so many people that they cannot tell their story, that are not ready or not prepared, or those traumatic experiences don't allow them to share their story with the world. But Sanooja had this desire to tell the world what had happened to her husband. And it was the beginning of a relationship that started in 2022, and that it has continued till now.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's always ethical concerns to worry about when you're trying to do this type of work, specifically in how you are, relaying someone's lived experience through these traumatic times. And a lot of times in our work in Greece and then also in Poland, it's like in this border area, it is very tricky because you don't want to re-traumatize the individual who's gone through this experience, and then for family members who are trying to identify their loved ones who may have some sense of a path or a hope that they've identified the person wherever they may be. It's really unbelievably traumatic to go back into this emotionally. But it feels from this article, and also just every time I speak to you about this, it feels very much like you and Sanooja did this together, almost as if like she found you and was like, yes, Gabby's going to help me tell my story because the world needs to hear what happened to Sanrim. And it's like a very, very intense piece. For me, although that we have been in the region, still, even if I hadn't been in the region, your piece immediately transported me into the space. And it felt like I was walking alongside him as if I was another person along with him trying to go. And it's a really, really scary environment. Even in the middle of the day, after 2, 3 in the afternoon, you could suddenly find yourself very, very lost, and everything looks identical. Find yourself in the mud, in the marsh, and it's really, really a scary environment that you could easily get disoriented in. But just prior to that, like Sanrim has a really complex story, how he gets to Europe in the first place. And again, we are definitely going to be pushing all of our viewers and listeners to read your piece because it's important and it's very well deserving of the Fetisov Award and all of the other accolades it's received, and as the Border Graves Project receives the European Press Prize. I mean, this is really seriously wonderful work. But it would be wonderful if you could help the viewers today understand a little bit of what Sanrim's journey was like to get to Europe in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, there, as Sanrim and Sanooja's story, there are so many, right? But for me, as a journalist, was my desire with this story was to really pull the reader into their love story, like who they were before they crossed borders, like before Sanrim crossed that border, and who they are as a family, right? Who both grew up in Sri Lanka. They fell in love as teenagers. As kids, as schoolmates, and that's what I try to also tell through this story, like who they were as people, and that's something that we don't really see often in migration reporting. But and that's why people also get tired of this reporting, right? Especially now in Europe, when more than 29,000 people have died on European migration roads in the last decade. So I understand that for some people they can get tired of this news, right? And then people try to avoid this news, but I want to show that the Sanrim was not just a number, there was not just a statistic, but he was a father, that he was a husband, that he was a son. And well, to answer your question, so Sanrim and Sanooja, well, Sanrim made this decision of come to Europe, and before even coming, they made this whole plan of how am I going to get there, and they didn't have the resources to get here, and they decided to sell a plot of land of Sanrim in Sri Lanka. Even Sanooja sold some of her jewelry so that they could afford that trip for Sanrim. And Sanrim paid for a fake Schengen visa, and the starting plan was he will fly to Moscow and then go into Helsinki through Finland and enter the European Union with this fake visa, but it didn't work. And then he had to pivot it to plan B, and that's when he heard of the Belarusian path, where he didn't need a visa; he could just cross into Lithuania. But being in this forest, he was stuck in the forest for 8 days without water, without food, sometimes drinking dirty water from the rivers, and with pain in his stomach, because he had recently, before he left Sri Lanka, he had been operated of kidneys, and sometimes he will urinate blood. So a very difficult situation that he was telling all this to Sanooja while he was going through this trip. So they will talk on the phone, they will make video calls, they will send voice messages to each other, and finally he made it to Vilnius on the 8th time that he crossed. After several pushbacks, that he will cross into Vilnius and into Lithuania side and then get back to Belarus, because the Lithuanian border guards will push him back into Belarus. But somehow he managed to get to Vilnius, and he had bought a ticket to go to Paris, where he was planning to start his new life. But on the third day, and this situation is not clear, this is what Sanooja told us what happened on that night. He enters his hotel in Vilnius, and the manager of the hotel called plainclothes officers, who grabbed him and whisked him back to the Belarusian border. It was already at night, and it was past midnight in Sri Lanka when Sanooja got this message from Sanrim saying, "No water, I think I'll die. I love you." And this is something that is not it's not new. Lithuanian border guards and Polish border guards both track daily pushbacks. If you go to their website, you will see how many pushbacks they have done since 2021.
Yeah, they're like celebrating it in some ways to say how effective they're being.
Yeah, exactly. And for me as a journalist, I was just really upset that, how is it possible that they track pushbacks, but they don't track people that have been reported missing, they don't track number of deaths. There is no way to find this information online, and even requesting information to their agencies, the government in Lithuania, was extremely hard. They won't share this information with you. So to be, when I talk to NGOs doing really, really amazing work in this region, they are the ones trying to connect the dots when they find a body, or someone on Facebook reports someone missing. They are the ones trying to connect, what's the gender, which date the person was reported missing, which day the body was found dead. If they have this information, trying to help their families to get an idea of where their loved one can be. But really, there is no support, no government responsible of doing this. And that was something that Sanooja also lived herself when she tried to reach out all of these agencies. Detention centers in Lithuania. Maybe she thought like, okay, maybe he is detained in a migrant center in Lithuania. They will hung up on her, like no English, and hung up, like literally. She will email the police, and the police will say just no information. And it was until she came across this NGO CNS group in Lithuania that she sent them a message on Facebook, and they were the only ones that really have supported Sanooja, and they helped her to find her husband. I mean, with the help later on of the Sri Lanka embassy, and it's a very complicated story. But basically, Sanrim had lived in the UK 7 years before he came to Lithuania on a student visa. He came on a student visa, but he didn't really study because he needed to support his family back home. He was only 20 years old, and he started just washing dishes in McDonald's and KFC and working on Lidl and Aldi and all these places to be able to support his family. And his visa expired, so he lived for years hiding from the authorities in the UK, until one day he was caught, and Interpol got his biometric data. And then, because of that event that happened 7 years before, is that Sanooja and the Sri Lankan foreign minister called Sanooja, saying that they had matched this data from Interpol to the body that was found in Lithuania in August 2022. But this just didn't happen, soon enough, and this happened more than 5 months later. So you can imagine the distress of a woman with a young kid, 5 years old, trying to search for her husband, trying to explain what had happened to his father, to his kid, who couldn't sleep, who could sense that something was wrong because his dad wasn't home and his mom was very distressed. So it's really I don't know. I cannot even imagine. I can imagine and I can tell what Sanooja has shared with me, but being in that position must be just hell, And during our report, we also talked to psychologists who will talk to us about ambiguous loss, and that's also something that Sanooja shared with me, saying that she was afraid, that she will have to spend her life with a lifelong doubt, because she was just so afraid that she will never find her husband, and you will never know is he alive, is he dead, where is he, what happened to him, and this is a loss, and this is a feeling, emotion that you can that no one can really explain, but that you really need to know what happened to your loved one. And well, thanks to all these dots came together, Sanooja then later found out that on that day that her husband sent that message, that was on the 16th of August, the body was recovered from this river on the 21st of August. So 4 days later, but she had to wait more than 5 months to know this story. Yeah.
I mean, we will talk a little bit more about this, but you referenced earlier that this is a love story, and that is the energy that we really receive from the piece. So your goal was achieved in a very, very intense way. And And, you know, there's this line in here in your story where Sanooja says, it's really difficult to love someone who's so ambitious. And I think now in the flip side, she's as ambitious as he was to ensure that she gets this closure, that he gets the rights that he deserves after death. And these are things that are enshrined in international human rights law that countries right now are ignoring and are like just flat out like breaking the international standards. It's really, really an intense reality. If you think about right now, Poland has suspended the right to asylum. They did that for 60 days. They then extended it. We just had the same thing happen in Greece last week, where they're suspending it for 90 days for anyone coming from the North African pathway. So, and Lithuania is kind of, fighting, as they're saying, in the International Criminal Justice Court, like against Belarus, saying you owe money to us for all of our needs to defend our border because you are practicing this hybrid warfare. But at the end of the day, it is about individual people. And this is something that I think is really overlooked in all the fast news and the fast journalism we're receiving. So again, we just really wanted to commend you on the way that you rooted this piece in people, in their story, in their connection to each other, and in this family, because you really feel it deeply. And it's you feel like you know her and you know him simply because you read this article.
Yeah, I really believe that journalism at its best is not about neutrality. It is about humanity. And before seeing people as sources or as a source more for a story, I see them as people. And yeah, it's like someone can argue that that maybe I get too close to my sources, but I will argue that which sources you can get close to and which ones you can't.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
And yeah, I definitely believe that this transparency also with Sanooja about like how I wanted to tell her story, my own personal experience as a migrant, as having someone that I love so much that went on a similar journey as Sanrim. That was my dad, who left Venezuela as an undocumented migrant, fleeing the political crisis in Venezuela, and travel by foot, by bus, trying to enter all these countries, and finally got to Chile. I could really put myself in Sanooja's shoes, of tracking someone that you love so much, during that journey. And I cannot even imagine like what it would have been if I didn't know where my dad was, if something happened to him and I couldn't find him. And I think that personal connection and somehow really helped me to connect with Sanooja in a more personal level, and for her to open up with me as she has done it. And I really don't think that she sees me as a journalist. I think she sees me as a friend. And I think that's great because I am a journalist, but I think at that moment she also needed a friend, going through that situation by herself was just hard enough, and I just didn't want to go and get her story and buy, like I really also to be able to report on a story with so many details. You really need to also get close to your sources, to the person. And like I never had never met her in person, but we really developed this strong relationship over multiple phone calls that were not even to interview her. It was just to, hey, how are you doing? Like how are you today? You know, how's Hashim? How's your kid? Is he going to school? Has he stopped getting the bed wet? You know, how was for her to go through that process of trying to search for her husband um, and having a kid at home. You know and 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 really like going through that again by herself, because even this whole situation really had also brought also some disruption in her family. Some people that believed Sanrim died, and on the other hand, Sanrim's mother, who doesn't believe that was her son who died, you know, because again, she cannot accept that she hasn't seen the body, that she hasn't seen the grave, that she still cannot connect, and she cannot wrap her head around what happened. So yeah.
So you were saying that, you know, the NGO that helped Sanooja find Sanrim, it had to have brought her some closure. I mean, you know, she doesn't have this moment now where she's just constantly wondering, worrying about this forever experience of never knowing. But you also alluded to the fact that the mom does not believe that her son is gone. So what is this dynamic like now, considering that they have a son who is the grandson? And what is that like for Hashim? And then also, what is it like for Sanooja and the mom? And it's a really complex reality when a certain member of the family just doesn't want to accept that this is truly their child is gone.
Yeah, I think that is a very complex situation, and I'm honestly actually not sure how much I can share right now here. But yeah, some of the things that Sanooja has mentioned is, well, she, the mother of Sanrim, doesn't really talk to her much anymore, and it has been really a hard rupture in their relationship, you know, because she's in one side, she's this woman fighting for justice and fighting to find the truth about what happened to him, and on the other side is this mother who cannot accept it, you know, that it's just too hard, too and not completely clear for her, because, well, again, she was not there, she didn't see the body, you know, and she hasn't been able to visit the grave. And on the burial ceremony that Sanooja watched through Zoom on her phone,
That's crazy.
she said, like, the mother of Sanrim said, "That's not my song." So even seeing that is something that she cannot really accept it, and I don't know how this could change in the future. Maybe helping her to come to visit the grave in Lithuania, but it goes beyond that. I feel no that just maybe sometimes like just seeing a grave with that name, it's not enough. I don't know. I think that's a very personal experience for each person, but I can definitely say that this dynamic in the family has been something that it has been quite hard for Sanooja to navigate.
So, I mean, obviously, in that 4 months of time after that message, that's just that fateful message, thinking that he's not going to make it, she has no idea what's really happened. And then this kind of wild, kind of like just so interesting that something that happened to him 7 years earlier ends up leading to the DNA that helps identify him. But now she has a different fight. And it would be really interesting for our listeners and viewers to understand what she's really fighting for now and what she's already gone through just to get to the point where she is today.
So Sanooja and the NGO Sienos Group have taken this case to the Lithuanian court, and they have brought this case 7 times without appeal. And finally, the Lithuanian court closed the case, saying that they don't have any basics for criminal court. There is no proof of any criminal investigation of what happened, and they cannot determine the cause of death. And the lawyers said that they cannot. They are not even exploring the responsibility of the border guards who push him in the middle of the night in that border. Like, someone needs to be responsible for that pushback.
And he was documented on Lithuanian soil. I mean, there's evidence of him being in the country, and then that's like, how do you not investigate that?
If anyone dies in a country within your jurisdiction, you should investigate what happened, right? But they are completely just not being responsible of this death, to the point that even when the body was recovered from the river 4 days later, it seems they didn't make an autopsy. And they only did that 5 months later, when Sanooja was already trying to find out what had happened to him, and was connected now with the Interpol and the embassy. They had matched the body to Sanrim, and like that's something that they have talked to the lawyers about, and well, basically the Lithuanian courts didn't consider they have any responsibility, and then because of they closed the case finally, now the Sanooja took this to the European Court of Human Rights. In fact, when we published the investigation in December 2023, Sanooja was, with the help of the NGO, was collecting resources to crowdfunding resources to be able to bring this case to the court, because of course you have to pay to lawyers, you have to, all the paperwork to be able to do this, and resources that she doesn't have. And I'm really glad that our investigation helped her in a way that people started donating to her case. So our investigation was published with Unbias News, and later it was republished in LRT, the Lithuanian national broadcast. And people in Lithuania started calling the NGO CNS group to support, like, how can I help to bring this case to the European Court of Human Rights. And now in February 2024, the case was submitted to the European Court, and well, it's going to be a long battle to find justice, but I think Sanooja is totally up for it, and she's really pursuing this.
I mean, it's really shocking to think that that the Lithuanian court this many times would just keep pushing this thing along to try to make it go away. You have a date of death, and then you have a date of an autopsy, and there's 5 months in between these two. So how is that not worth an investigation as to where is this body for 5 months, and how he's marked on Lithuanian soil, and then he's pushed back out of the country, and then he's now found inside Lithuania. Am I correct? He's found inside the Lithuania's borders, and this is now why he's actually buried inside Lithuania.
Yeah, but the autopsy report says is that when the body was recovered from the river 4 days later, it was in such a state of decomposition that they couldn't make an autopsy, basically.
That's just not.
Yeah. So sorry, like it says that the body was in such a state of decomposition of up to 5 months. So that's what the autopsy report says, which is like it is like if they had found the body 5 months later, but that's not true, because the body was found 4 days later. But they say that it was in such decomposition state that the autopsy wouldn't determine the cause of death. So there are really uh, these holes on this autopsy report that deserve to be investigated, but that the Lithuanian courts have rejected to do.
But
And
this is why Sanooja has the right to take it to the European Court of Human Rights,
yes,
because she has essentially exhausted all opportunities in Lithuania, and that she is
right,
unable to make any progress here. So now she has the right to bring it higher. But she's also
right.
now dealing with a whole lot of weirdness in this process. So she doesn't seem like the type of person who's going to give up. But
No.
this doesn't seem like her fight is even remotely close to being over.
Yeah, I mean, like I so admire Sanooja. Like being like like being willing to fight this from 8,000 kilometers away, where she is in this small peninsula in Sri Lanka. That sometimes if she needs to go to an embassy, it's not even in her city. She needs to travel to Colombo, which is 10 hours away by bus, and also more than 10,000 rupees. Like, it's also very costly for her to do all this. But she's pushing, and she continues to believe that Sanrim deserves to be remembered, that deserves justice, and I think she's aware that this is going to be a long battle, and but I don't think, as you said, I don't think she's going to give up, and I think Hashim also helps her to to give her that he gives her that strength of trying to find the truth. Yeah.
What was this like for you to do this work? What challenges did you face in trying to report this story inside Lithuania?
Um, yeah, I think as as a as a as a journalist in Lithuania, well, had to I have to say that the government didn't help, but they also didn't push back.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were like I would send them requests, they wouldn't respond. I managed to talk to one member of the parliament, who was really helpful, and also when the story came out, this he brought this story to the parliament. Of course, the politicians there didn't consider it in a good light or in a positive light. It was referred as that unfortunate article about our borders.
Wow.
But but yeah, for me, I think the biggest challenge was really the data, no, the international, this void on this data, on like what happens to these people, like who is counting the people who died, who is counting the people who are missing. But I had a great support from the NGOs in Lithuania and in Poland, who I collaborated with, to put this number together. And I had to visit it. I had to visit all these cemeteries, because there was no other way. There was no way to find online data. So we had to create all this data by visiting the graves and seeing, like taking pictures, seeing if it had name, if it didn't have names, and sometimes you will run with the luck of seeing a local who was just visiting a grave. Like like sometimes the locals didn't know who was buried in that grave, but they were not, like, for example, in Poland, I once when I was in visiting this cemetery where a Syrian man had been buried, and he didn't have a name either. But then I ran into, like, casually, like by coincidence, I mean, into this really sweet old couple who arrive on their bikes in this place, bringing flowers to the grave. And I asked them about, like, oh, do you know who is buried him? Like, and they would just, the Syrian migrant. But they didn't know anything, but they cared so much about, like, what was happening in their borders, and really the support of people like them, these locals and these NGOs, people who live in these border regions, was essential for me as a journalist covering this issue. And yeah, I think I couldn't have done it without them.
And we heard the same things in the first episode of this season. For us, we had Anya Albath, the co-founder of Grupa Granica, talking about both the shocking things that some local people were saying about protecting the borders, and then this like outpouring of humanity and support, which mirrored a lot of what we saw in Greece back in 2015, 2016, where everyone was saving people in the sea. And then back in season 2, when we were actually just an audio podcast, we also had representatives from the NGO that you've worked with, and they were on our show back, I believe it was season 2, episode 7. So we'll put links to these episodes into the show notes so that people can get the context of the, and also like just the longevity of this scenario. I mean, like you did this work years ago now, and then also you first started, as you said, kind of in an odd way, you ended up in Lithuania because of housing issues in Germany, but that's 2021. That's 4 years ago, and now here we are in a situation where you have governments just blatantly violating human rights laws, suspending asylum procedures, leaving people to die in the forest as they do in the sea. And it's a really intense thing, but this type of work is really critical. And yet I think there's a question that begs to be asked is like, is it having an impact on the legal frameworks, on policy? I mean, in Poland right now, you have a government that is leaning left until this most recent election, where you're not going to have a leaning right president, but yet the government itself underneath the prime minister is still leaning left, and yet they're the ones passing these laws that are violating human rights covenants. So what do you think that this type of reportage does on an impact level?
It brings change. It brings change to people like Sanooja, that are able to tell their stories. And, like also as what Sanooja has told me, like she would have never imagined that her story will receive this amount of recognition and this amount of attention. And for her, that's so meaningful, that 3 years later, people are reading Sanrim's story, and people are getting to know their love story and getting to know them. So that's for me, honestly, the biggest honor and the biggest impact of this work, that Sanooja has been able to tell her story as she wanted it. And I didn't write, and I didn't tell the story without her, but with her, and that it meant so much, and that she felt so heard and so seen, that she even translated my article into Tamil to share
awesome.
this story with her community. Like I tried several times pitching this article to Sri Lankan and Indian news outlet to translate this piece into Tamil language, because I think it's very important for Sanooja to have this in her own language. But I was not successful. And I was honest with her, like I really have sent so many emails, but it hasn't worked out. And she took the initiative of translating my words and putting them into Tamil. And I really I get goosebumps, like now that I think about it, it's like, wow, like I felt just so honored that, that this piece was, it meant so much to her that she wanted to share it with her world, with her community. And yeah, and she put it on a Google document and a public link, and shared it on WhatsApp and on her social media channels. So again, like, this is impact for me. But in this policy level, I think it really takes much time to to see change and to see yeah, I mean, you create awareness, as journalists, we can create awareness, but I hope that that our work gets noticed by politicians. And like, really, when we finish this kind of work, we try pushing to reach those spaces. So for example, with the Lorenzo Natali Prize, I was receiving an award for this story at the European Parliament in the heart of Brussels. So I had this stage, so I presented this story and talk more broadly about border violence and human rights of migrants, right, in this region. So definitely this attention, like, creates and amplifies the struggle of the NGOs, the struggle of people in this situation. But yeah, I think it definitely takes time, and for me, it's a win if people can have more empathy and understand that migration is not problem of numbers, of statistics, or resources, but it's just truly a problem of empathy. And I think that's what the story is about, that you get to know people as they are, and give them that dignity and agency. Yeah.
You had at one point previously in our conversations about this, you talked about what Sanrim and Sanooja used to call each other, and it was really sweet, and I thought it was really powerful as well. Would you like to share that with everyone?
Yeah. Yeah, they used to call each other Thangam. That means gold in Tamil. And Sanooja said that they started calling each other like that since, like, very young. Even when she wouldn't accept that she liked him in school, like, in her diary, she would write about him and would call him Tangam. So I found that detail just so sweet, and also, like, gold. Like, it's such a powerful word somehow.
And then you also referenced like what Hashim is like now for her. You referenced that he's like a carbon copy of Samrin. So she has him even though she doesn't anymore. And it was, you also referenced and shared some things with us about how people in his past are trying to keep his like existence or his memory alive, and they're doing things that he loves to do. And Hashim is now kind of part of this as well to some degree.
Yeah, I think Sanooja, in this very optimistic way somehow. She also has to be strong for her kid. She tries to really, and not tries, but like, she generally sees him as the copy of Sanrim, and every gesture, I guess, smile, like how he poses for a picture, how he stands, and it's like he can see Sanrim on her kid. And yeah, she has some, like, really sweet things, like she puts images together. So she puts like, I don't know, like a picture of Sanrim standing like that, and then, like, literally next to it, Hashim is standing the same way with the same posture, same gesture, which is like, wow. It's like, really, she she lost Sanrim, but she really believed that she got a copy on Hashim, and this is a copy that is for a lifetime. And yeah, that's something that, well, as a mother, is invaluable, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of a lot of people in our work when we were making our film, there was like this question about what happens for the families back home, and then how do they, perhaps maybe for the mom, it's like how do they come to that closure, and that tended to include repatriation and being able to bring back the body of their family member. But in this case, it's different, and Sanooja shared her thoughts on why it's different for them.
Yeah. So for Sanooja, she really wanted Sanrim to rest in the place he wanted to be. And, like families often have to go, like get this huge cost to bring their family back home. It's about like, well, depending on from where to where it's traveling, it can be more than 10,000 euros. And even, the NGO told Sanooja, we can support you if you want that. We can also create a crowdfunding campaign and help you to crowdfund the sources if you want Sanrim to be in Sri Lanka. But there were mainly two reasons why she decided against it. And one was that in her Muslim beliefs, Sanrim had suffered enough. So Sanrim was in this morgue for more than 5 months since his body was recovered until February, when he finally was identified and buried. And she believed that he could feel the cold of that place and that his body could feel the pain. So for her, it was important to bury him as soon as possible, as soon as she found that was him. And on the other hand, it was also about giving Sanrim like his last will, right? That was that he wanted to be in Europe, so at least his body will rest in Europe. And that's something that Sanooja really respected and really honored. And that's why Sanrim was buried in Lithuania, even when she couldn't be part of that burial ceremony, even when she had to watch her husband being buried through the screen of her phone, with bad reception, that it just became just pixels on her phone. So I think Sanooja also, loved him so much also that she had to make these hard decisions for her as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that, what that must have been like for her. And I know that right now she is fighting to still get the right to be there. So I'm assuming that what's next for her is more of a legal battle, and then also fighting to get to that gravesite in person.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I really, really believe and pray that she will be able to do that. I think she deserves that, and she deserves that closure. She deserves that moment of honor her husband and show her son the grave of her father, his father, and I think so far she has been only being able to pray, through her phone. Like sometimes she calls volunteers from the NGO who can go to the grave for an hour or something, and play the phone so that she can pray in front of the grave. That's something that she has been doing for the last 3 years. So I really think that now she's pursuing that. Of course, again, there are so many obstacles to do it, but yeah, we really hope that she will be able to do that.
Well, if there's any way that we can be part of that process with you to assist in ensuring that she can get there, please. We want to help somehow. She deserves that much, at least that, right?
Yeah.
Gabby, thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us. And again, I say to everyone back home, like you need to read this article. It's an amazing piece of journalism, and it's really emotional, and it's very powerful. And thank you so much for putting all this effort into it and dedicating all this time to make this a reality and to represent this story with her. It's really beautiful.
Thank you, Doug. And if I can just say one last thing, it's just that, well, of course, read the story, but you know that this story is not just about Sanrim and Sanooja and about them and what happened to them, but it's also a story about us. And I think I also hope that people get to reflect on, on the policies we create as society and the values that we hold as a society. And and I hope that it also helps society to confront with a very uncomfortable truth, and it's that the European borders have become battlegrounds for survival. And it's that there are real people that behind the headlines that are lost, and there are kids, and there are mothers, and there are wives. So thank you so much, Doug, for this amazing space to share this story, and for all the work you do at Refocus as well, because it's part of the same mission.
Thank you, Gabby. Really appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Everybody, thank you for joining us this week. And as I said earlier in the beginning, that this is our last in-depth interview of the season. But we will be back next week with another Humanitarian Watch to close us out for season 4 before we go to our summer short series. We really appreciate your support and your engagement with the work we do, and we hope that you can continue to support us. You can do so by going and becoming a patron on our Patreon page, or donating directly to our site, and follow, like, share, and help us bring stories like Gabby's and Samrina and Sanooja's to a larger audience. So we appreciate your support, and we will see you next week.